So the phase one of our project really was to do research, to go through the local history books, journals, archives, manuscripts, interviews, and to hold music memory days with members of the population. And that was a particularly rich source of information as we really got the community, started to get the communities involved in the projects. And what we actually found was, of course, that there's a long musical history, and there's a gentleman there on the head of the slipway at Porthscatho, just to prove that we've got some history in our part of the world. We also, when we started to look back at some of the books, we found things like this, which is a family in the 19th century emigrated from Porthscatho to Wisconsin in America, and they wrote back to us in Porthscatho, and one of the things they included was a poem. And in the course of that poem was this verse, which they said was sung by boatmen in Porthscatho. And it looked to us like it was the chorus of a shanty or something like that. So this was how we started to recover some of the music of the Roseland. And kind of at the other end of the sort of musical spectrum in some senses, we also had a lot of influence from the classical side of music. So this is largely through Emma's connection. We came across a composer called Ian Stevens, who'd written a piece called Carricknath, a clarinet concerto. And what you can see on the screen here is a photograph of St Anthony Headland with the notes following the contour of the headland as it goes down into the sea, and he wrote a piece of music using this sort of musical figure that was directly inspired by the landscape. Emma's connection also brought us into contact with all this classical music because of her connection with the Radford sisters. Evelyn and Maisie Radford were Emma's mother's cousins, and they settled in St Anthony in 1912. And in the 1920s, they formed a Roseland concert party, which took music and dances from many lands all around Cornwall. They set up and trained many choirs, including St Maur's Choral Society, which was recorded by the BBC in 1937, and then later they set up the Falmouth Opera Group and were stalwarts of the Cornwall Music Festival. So this has led to a thriving musical life and society on the Roseland, and the Radford Trust was set up to support young musicians in Cornwall, and it has an impressive archive at Crescent-Kerno. So there's one of the things in this classical side was an opera called Morvoran, which is Cornish for mermaid, and composed by Philip Cannon, and Maisie Radford herself wrote the libretto and was premiered at the Royal College of Music in 1964. And we'll come a bit back to that in a minute. Another aspect was the hymn tunes that were named after Roseland chapels. So we found that there was a Truro-based composer called Bob Martin, lay preacher, who had composed several hymns which had the names of chapels on the Roseland, and they were Porthscatho, Portlow, Ruin High Lanes, and Tregony. So that was another musical source for us.